The Idol Hero, Songstress, by DrgnMstr. Chapter 7, Revelations and Plots. Quick shout out to Lofi Geek for providing the backing track for this episode. The rest of the week saw things getting better for Izuku, and it could all be traced back to his first Quirk counseling session. First, he discovered that his Quirk evolution had gone further than he thought. Before the evolution, his Quirk had just changed his physical sex and made him react in more stereotypically feminine ways. But that night, while it by far had not shown the true extent of his Quirk, revealed some hints to the direction of the change. If a song had described or was dedicated to a magical girl from any show he knew, it would allow him to change into any magical girl on the show. He could also switch between girls from the same show during his traditional 10-minute window of transformation. Transforming into a magical girl brought with it the powers of that girl, but with one caveat that no one expected or noticed until it was discovered by Miyuki-san. The amount of power he was able to put into the abilities of the form he was in was significantly weaker. That was not to say they were weak at all, oh no, but he was not able to cause the massive destruction which was known for the magical girl he was focusing on. Why? Or by precisely how much was something that remained to be determined, as was the source of the magic he used. Later sessions would be devoted to that. One new thing that was discovered, which they couldn't tell if it was part of the original form of his Quirk or not, was that any other song sung by a female would transform him into a teen version of that female. In this instance, he would have a substantially weaker form of the performer's Quirk, and if it were covered by other artists, which form he would take would depend upon which version he was most familiar with. After all, he transformed into a teen version of the artist who most recently covered his anthem, since that was the version with which he was most familiar. He also discovered that he could only barely undergo a maximum of 2 10-minute rounds of transformations. Whether this was due to his not having practice with the Quirk, or some other reason, was also something they'd have to work on. But this appeared to be, for now, a hard limit, as he had almost passed out after transforming back from his second form of the evening. If Suchan hadn't leaped to catch him, he probably would have hit his head on the floor. His relationship with Suchan was another major improvement in his life. He could admit now that Katsuki had not been a friend since they were 4 years old, which meant he had been without a friend for a very, very long time. But not only did the frog girl not turn her back on him after she witnessed what his Quirk did, but she went out of her way to let him know she supported him. Yes, she thought his Quirk was weird, she said so herself, but in the same breath she also admitted that she found it cute. In her words, "It's like having 2 friends in one, kiddo." The green bean couldn't be angry at her for putting it like that. And even he had to admit his Quirk was just plain weird, and that wasn't even counting the number of laws of physics and biology it seemed to break. She didn't even bat an eye when she learned the effects of his Quirk on his body. She had started to attend the Quirk counseling sessions with him to provide emotional support, with full knowledge and permission by her parents. As the family figured, exposing the younger children to such a strange Quirk would teach them valuable lessons about being open-minded. This attitude came as a surprise to him, considering what happened later on during the first Quirk counseling session, when his mother arrived with a small team of medical specialists to discuss what his Quirk was doing to his body physically. After reassuring the medical professionals that yes, it is okay for the Asuis and heroes to be present, the doctors began to explain Izuku's situation. The transformations his body underwent caused his body to mutate, but not in such a way as would be immediately noticeable. His hormone levels showed normal for both physical sexes, male and female, and he had what appeared to be 2 sets of reproductive organs. The brain also showed physical attributes somewhere between the male brain and the female brain. In essence, Izuku was turning into a half-boy, half-girl physically. There were some medical issues that would probably arise soon, due to the changes the teenage body would undergo, but given that the physical changes from the quirk were ongoing, they were uncertain as to whether or not any permanent corrective action should be taken. Needless to say, this news shocked Izuku, who was just getting used to being intersex. Does this mean that I'm transforming into a girl permanently? The song's sexual asked. No, the lead doctor replied firmly. If that were the case, your male organs would be deteriorating. Instead, they seem to be growing alongside the female organs. Thus, the reason we are reticent to use any medical means of correction. Oh, was all the brunette singer could say. Tiger, who had been standing to the side, walked over and put his hand on the half-boy, half-girl's shoulder. What I think they're trying to say is what we've been trying to tell you all along. You and you alone decide on how you live your life. Male, female, somewhere in between, or other. But know that you seem to have a decent support network wherever you side. The massive hero explained, motioning to the others in the room. Indeed, the man's words were proving true. Every person he turned toward at least gave him looks of acceptance, if not out-and-out support. The younger children didn't understand everything, and he shuddered to think what that family's nighttime talk would be like. Eraserhead, or Aizawa as he was told to call him, gave him a look that Izuku would swear meant, "It'll be okay," although he knew the man would deny it. Mike, on the other hand, had no such reticence. Instead, the man gave him 2 thumbs up. Midnight responded like she normally did, which mirrored his mom in that they both looked like they wanted to give him a big hug. As he last settled his eyes on Sue, he noticed that she was actually smiling at him. She nodded once and said, "There's no controlling what your quirk is doing to you, kiddo, so it is useless for me to get upset over it. I'll support you whatever way you want to go." But what about people think... Oh, excuse me. But what about what people will think of me as a hero? Before any of the adults could answer, the frog girl had an answer for him. Hopefully, by the time you need to worry about public perception, you will be living how you want. At that point, people will have to accept it. And how will they find out if you don't tell them? Or if you wish to go the advocacy route, you can use it to your advantage, kiddo. In the end, she seemed rather supportive of his self-explorations as well. She just wanted him to be happy. That humbled him a bit and gave him some courage to try again with the school. This was further bolstered by Tiger and Eraserhead, who had asked for as much of his story as he was willing to tell. Eraserhead was blunt but also reassuring, when he reminded Izuku that no one but he himself could tell him what he was. Tiger had echoed that sentiment a bit more tactfully, and had given him a name of a good gender specialist in Mustafu that he could go to. He also offered his team's campsite as a place to train for more destructive powers his forms provided. President Mike affirmed that choice with gratitude, which gave Izuku the confidence to accept the offer as well. So while he had been nervous to return to school, he didn't feel quite as anxious as he had the first day. This turned out to be a good thing, as the brown-haired girl appeared to make her mission to get him to open up. He had learned the girl's name was Komori Kinoko, and she had the power to spread mushrooms anywhere and everywhere she wished, within a certain radius. She was planning to become an idol hero, which seemed to resonate with the Greenette's heart for some unknown reason. They spent the time until the first bell animatedly talking about it, and had planned to talk more about it during lunch. But both of them were surprised when 2 more students approached them after the lunch bell rang. One boy with blue hair and rectangular glasses introduced himself as Tinya Ida, and the girl with long black hair that he had noted was watching him the first day said her name was Yayorozu Momo, the class president. Both were obviously well-mannered in the same way most of the students were, and that they waited until they could interject themselves politely before the introductions. As it turned out, both had wanted to eat with Izuku as well, but for different reasons. Yayorozu-san, in addition to welcoming him to the class as president, also was a vice president of the school's student LGBTQ+ support club. She had wanted to offer her club support services should Izuku have needed them. The black-haired teen may have been an heiress in a well-to-do family, but she was surprisingly delicate in her approach to such matters. Izuku found he could probably like her very easily, and invited her to join them, which Komori-san instantly agreed to. Komori also agreed to expanding their lunch group by 1 more when the blue-haired boy asked to join them. Izuku recognized the family name immediately, but did not mention it when the boy himself didn't. It seemed that Ida was not only the vice president of the class, but also was a part of Izuku's dedicated deduction class. He had originally come to offer his help in any Quirk-related matters as a member of the class, only to be pleasantly surprised to find that the nervous teen would be joining him there. He bowed once and stated that the offer was open at any time, which Izuku found refreshing. Apparently, Komori picked up on the fact that Izuku was not used to having people genuinely want to help him, and readily agreed when her new acquaintance invited him as well. That lunch sparked a friendship between the 4 of them, which made Izuku actually look forward to going to school for probably the first time ever. He was happy that the 3 of the 4 people with odd reactions were genuinely interested in him as a friend. The only holdout was the bicolored boy, who he later found out was Todoroki. The boy was normally aloof to the most of the class, but seemed curious about Izuku. Still, he kept his distance, and Izuku was not going to push it. He was just happy to have friends. His mom had noticed the change, and had been giving him subtle words of encouragement as he left every day. This day was no different, even if she seemed somewhat distracted. He had wondered why, since he knew she had the day off, but quickly put it out of his mind as he raced to catch the train to take him to school. Friday morning started just like the past few days had gone. He met first with his normally slightly withdrawn friend Kinoko. They discussed the most recent idol news about a band of idols that were performing at a fundraiser that weekend. He loved Imagination's works, and had quite a few of their songs on his playlist. His choir class was even going to be practicing one of their songs next week, which made Izuku a bit nervous as that could set off his quirk if he were not careful. They had discovered just the night before that while humming to a tune would not set off his quirk, he had to focus especially hard to keep it from activating every time he actually sang. He would have to tell the choir instructor that news and see what he said. I wish I could go, Izuku whined slightly to his friend. Why can't you, Shiro? The fundraiser runs all day Saturday, and they're not set to perform until the early evening. I have to go out of town for quirk training. The whining boy sighed as he looked down. We had arranged this on Monday so we could work on some of the more active parts of my quirk. I hope you don't mean destructive, Midoriya-san, a male voice called from behind them. They turned to see their blue-haired friend walk stiffly up to them. Not that you have told us anything about what your quirk is, but I would hope you have a quirk counselor there just in case, and you are taking proper precautions, yes? Well, he's not as tied up in rules as you are, Yayorozu interjected as she was getting out of her limo. Midoriya-san strikes me as the kind of person that doesn't want to cause people unnecessary trouble. So I'm sure he's got all of that covered. Yes. the momentarily flustered singer said to everyone's smiles. My Quirk counselor is taking me to another hero's base camp to practice where nobody can get hurt. You're getting there, the mushroom girl said while she patted his shoulder. Just concentrate on the words, not the people around you, sure? The broccoli-headed boy blushed as slightly at his friend's reminder. His new friends, Sue included once she learned about it, had taken it upon themselves to help him lose the stutter. It was clear the speech impediment was more anxiety-related instead of physical, so they decided to make him feel as safe as possible. So, what could make you want to skip Quirk training? The heiress asked, trying to catch up on the parts of the conversation she had missed. The two shyer members of the group exchanged looks before the green-haired one said, Well, it's like this. That conversation took them all the way up to the beginning of homeroom. The classes that day were difficult, but that was the norm for this school. This school focused on the intelligent and the gifted, and so the curriculum was more challenging than Aldera's. Then again, the increased difficulty actually worked in Izuku's favor, as he had little time to be bored or to let his mind wander. So he jumped when his cell phone started buzzing and chirping. The teacher paused and turned to look at him. Cell phones are to be silenced during class, Midoriya said. That was a special consideration for him. They were normally to be turned off. I'm sorry, Sensei, the startled boy stuttered even as he scrambled to get his phone out of his pocket. But that is the emergency tone that disregards any silencing settings. One of the teacher's eyebrows rose at that response. Okay then, step. He didn't get to finish as the intercom in the room crackled into life. All teachers report to the faculty lounge immediately. Class presidents are to maintain order in the classrooms until lunch. The teacher's surprised expression turned into shock as the announcement repeated. Yayorozu-san, make sure no one but Midoriya-san leaves until lunch, the sensei ordered. Midoriya-san, you may step into the hallway to answer that. If you need to leave, let the class president know, then stop by the faculty lounge to let us know. Hi, sensei. Both teens responded simultaneously. Izuku stepped out of the door and started to look at his text messages. Emergency text chat. Mom has joined this chat. Midnight has joined this chat. Mom. Izuku? Izuku! Izuku, please answer me. Izuku Midoriya has joined this chat. Izuku Midoriya has changed his name to Izuku. Izuku. Mom? What's going on? Midnight. Izuku, I'm on my way to your school right now. As is Eraserhead. Izuku. What's going on? Mom. Altera was served with arrest warrants today. Izuku. Okay, but why is that an emergency? Wait, are you there at Aldera? Mom. Yes, sweetie, I am. Don't worry, I'm fine, but there was a complication. Midnight. The principal, the vice principal, and the PE teacher escaped, but not before seeing your mother. It is entirely possible that they are on their way over to your school. Just then, there was a loud crash and some screaming from within the classroom. Izuku poked his head inside the room to see shattered windows and black orbs crashing into the walls above everyone's head. Izuku. They're here! How do they know where to go? Mom. Just before they left, they let slip they know where you are. Izuku. ... There was another series of crashes, followed by more screaming coming from inside the classroom. From outside, he could hear someone call out, Midoriya! Izuku. What do I do? The teachers were all just called into a meeting, and Fuji-sensei is attacking the school. My classmates are in trouble. Mom. Damn! Midnight. Izuku, I don't like doing this, but we're too far out if they're already there. I know you will want to protect your friends. I, the pro hero Midnight, authorize you to use your quirk for self-defense and to ensure the safety of those around you. You are to prioritize escape and evacuation first and foremost. Do you understand? Mom. Question marks. Midnight. There are no heroes near there, and Eraserhead can't get in contact with his contacts in the faculty. Izuku. I understand. I need to go now. Midnight. Good luck. We'll be there as fast as we can. Izuku wasted no more time as he entered the classroom again, thankful at least that no one had shut the door. Yaoyorozu-san, Ida-san, we need to get everyone out of here, now! He declared, his stutter disappearing in his haste. He then rushed over to toward the narrow space of walls between the shattered windows. I'll distract them! Ida looked up and started to quickly crawl his way toward the shorter boy as he said, We were told to remain here, and as proud students of Kamine Junior High, we can't leave you alone with them. They're after you. Those orders have been superseded. Look! He handed Ida his phone and then turned toward his black-haired friend. Please, Yaoyorozu-san. Please evacuate the class, and any other classes on the way. I'll be the rear guard. The heiress looked at her vice rep, whose eyes had grown wide as saucers while his skin turned pale. Several balls shot out through the walls, one narrowly missing Izuku. It was obvious this place would not be safe for very long. The blue-haired boy handed the phone back to his friend and said, Be careful, but follow those orders to the letter. Turning to the class rep, he stated, Midoriya-kun is right. We need to leave, now. Komori-chan, can you go to the faculty lounge and tell them what's going on? Izuku called out to his other friend. The girl nodded once and rushed over to her newest friend to take a look at his phone. Her face grew pale as she gave him a quick hug. Be careful, Shrimp. With that said, she was off toward the lounge on the first floor. Everyone, get up and file out in an orderly procession by row. Ida called out as Izuku made his way to the front of the room to stand by the door. He had hoped that his mom and Midnight would get in here in time, but with his luck, that wasn't going to be the case. The room was emptied remarkably quickly, and while Momo led her class down a nearby stairwell, Tinya ran to the other classes and told each set of representatives what was going on and what they needed to do. They didn't have very long, though, as he had to dodge black orbs fairly consistently. He had heard Komori come back to the room with Ika-sensei in tow, just as the last parts of the outer wall were shattered, taking up part of the floor with it. He had missed a worried-looking Ida and Momo, but he was out of time anyway, as he started backpedaling as fast as he could to avoid falling as the floor crumbled towards him. Luckily for him, he had already started to sing. So here he sings Moonlight Denatsu, the first Sailor Moon opening. This wasn't the same theme he used last time, but he had learned that he could pick which girl he could use in case of magical girl teams. And this series remained the one he knew best, which meant that he knew which powers would work best for a given situation. Desperately keeping his focus on the form he wanted, as he stepped back towards the door, a bright flash of light blinded his attacker and those watching long enough for the transformation to finish. Instead of the awkward marine uniforms, she was now wearing a white sailor suit with a blue flared miniskirt, blue boots with white borders at the knees, white gloves with blue bands at the ends, just beyond her elbows, and a blue choker around her neck. A blue stone was centered prominently on her tiara, which was the same color as the shoulder flap going to her shoulder blades in the back. Her now blue hair was blown about in the breeze as black orbs were making their way back to a man wearing the black tracksuit of Aldera Middle School.
Wait! Where did that worthless Deku go? Where are you hiding her?
The gym coach called out to her. He looked around frantically in a useless attempt to find his targets.
I said, where did you hide her?
Her only response was the last lines of the ending of the song, even as she backpedaled to avoid more of the crumbling floor. She quickly dove to the side as Komori and Iga-sensei screamed when the inner walls of the classroom were torn asunder. "I'm right here, Time-sensei," she called out as she stood up. "Or did you forget that my quirk changes my appearance? Leave the others out of this. It's me you want." Her teacher and her friend both just stood there with their mouths open in shock. "Go! Help is on the way! I'll protect you!" she called out to them before powering up her magical response.
You won't be protecting shit, girl!
The man called out as he sent his balls forward. Unfortunately for him, he gave her time to prepare a response. "Such language!" she called out as she prepared a weaker version of the attack she had used before this against the slime villain. "Shabon spray!" A stream of bubbles erupted from her hands toward the attacking teacher, quickly enveloping the area in a cold, thick fog-like mist. She quickly dove out of the way of the balls that were already speeding toward her, then dove again toward the hallway. When she entered the hallway, she quickly covered the mouths of both teacher and student. Once she was certain they wouldn't speak, she removed her hand from the teacher long enough to put her finger in front of her lips in the universal silencing gesture. The attacking man seemed confused at this, and was apparently unable to attribute the new state of affairs to the weak student he knew before.
Who's helping this powerless Deku?
The attacking ex-teacher called out in frustration as he sent more balls in every direction, even while sending some to try to flank her last known location. The balls started to break through the inner walls of the classroom, prompting the three of them to duck to avoid being inadvertently hit by them. Izuku knew this couldn't continue much longer and was quickly reaching a conclusion she would have to use the freezing variant and if she was going to protect herself and the others. Looking at both of them with as much sincerity as she could muster, she whisper-shouted, "Run! I will try to hold him off!" Just then, the crashing of the balls abruptly died to nothing, and the balls that were incoming fell to the ground, the black coating fading away to reveal baseballs. The attacker blinked in surprise as the mist fell away, apparently thinking he had an opportunity to kill the girl before finding his target, but a pink mist billowed up around him. He quickly fell asleep, allowing the spouse singer to look beyond him to ascertain what just happened. Standing on a nearby roof was a man with black hair, yellow goggles, and a black bodysuit. "Yes, help has arrived," Izuku shouted. "Midoriya-san, is that you?" Midnight called out from the ground as she finished putting the attacker in Quirk suppressing cuffs, having come up just behind him just before the mists were cancelled. "Hi," she called down. "Is there anyone else out there from Altera?"
We're about to determine that.
Eraserhead called out as his hair fell down to normal.
Remind me to discuss your quirk later.
He added gruffly.
In the meantime, stay there with anyone else with you until we can get you down safely.
Izuku nodded and turned to see two frightened people behind her. He could tell just by looking at them that they were not frightened of her, but rather for her. "I've got to widen my magical girl knowledge," she sighed as she looked between the two of them. "I can't keep relying on that anime." Komori actually laughed at this and added, "And Iza-chan, we've also got to work on your sense of style and grace. If you're going to take on the mantle of magical girls, you need a lot more grace than you were just showing, true?" Both Izuku and Iga-sensei groaned at her declaration. Inwardly, Izuku was both surprised and not surprised that Komori was not only taking her transformation in stride, but knew what she was. The same could not be said for Momo and Ida, who were looking at her from where they were in utter confusion. "Komori-san," the song user whined. "I'm not ready for those kinds of lessons yet. I'm still trying to figure out who I am most of the time. The mushroom idol just laughed. Soon enough, the area was pronounced clear of further attackers, and the students were given the rest of the weekend and the entirety of the following week off, while the school tried to figure out where to hold classes for the classrooms rendered unusable. Izuku's friends got to witness the end of his transformation when, with a swirl of bright, multicolored lights, she transformed back into his normal form. To say they were confused was an understatement. But before they could ask any questions, Iga spoke up and said, "Okay, I've looked over your quirk description and it doesn't mention this. You need to update me on what you've discovered in your quirk counseling." "That will take place after he has given his statement to the police." Eraserhead spoke up as he and Midnight walked up behind them. "And even then, we will be with him if his mother hasn't arrived." The pro-hero's tone sounded more than a little protective, which caused his friends and his teacher to blink. "It's okay, Eraserhead-san. I'm supposed to keep the school updated anyway," he said, frantically waving his arms in front of him. Turning back towards his teacher, he responded, But I have one request, Sensei." At the man's nod, he asked, I asked that my friends be there to hear it as well. It's embarrassing enough. I don't want to have to explain it twice." Just then a man in a trench coat and hat came up behind the two heroes. "If you found Midoriya-san, we need to get that statement from him." "Go ahead and talk with the police. Then come see us in the teacher's conference room, Midoriya-san," Iga said. A short time later, he found Izuku standing in front of his friends and teacher, explaining what he knew of his quirk, including only a mention that it had made him intersex. His mother had not arrived by then, so Eraser was leaning against the wall, giving everyone but the green singer a mild glare, as if to warn them to be on their best behavior. Midnight stood beside Izuku with her hand on his shoulder to offer support. The junior high teacher of the room sat there in silence, after taking notes on what was said. After performing a quick review of his notes, he said, "You still have full control of your actions when transformed, correct?" "Hi. Though the transformation does give me some of the personality traits of the person I've been turned into. So Sailor Mercury, for example, increases my analytical tendencies while giving me a calm, confident exterior. Sailor Moon, on the other hand, would make me clumsy, slightly airheaded, and filled with love for everyone and everything." The man nodded once as he noted that down. "We will have to be careful about your transforming for choir, but we should be able to work around that. You don't play an instrument, perhaps? Or are you willing to learn one?" "I don't know how to play one, Sensei. Why?" The song sexual asked curiously. "If you could learn one, and if it doesn't cause you to transform, it may be a way for you to limit your transformations while still connecting you to music. You said humming didn't cause you to transform either." At the teen's nod, he says, "Or have you as an a cappella backup for the choir? I'll have to discuss this with the music department." At the teen's nod, the teacher yields the floor to the other teens. Predictably, Komori is the first to speak up. "Wow, your quirk is so neat. I mean, if you time it right, you could be your own one-person show. I mean, either by singing songs that won't make you transform, then a short series of songs that would, or by saving the transformations for heroics. You could totally be an Iroh hero or Shroom." I don't know, Komori-chan. I don't generally like to call that much attention to myself." "I think you could do wonders as an idol hero, Midoriya-san." Momo spoke up.
I mean, you did say the other day you wanted to help people who weren't as lucky as you, right? Well, that would be the way to reach most of them.
I agree, Tinya added. We all know your normal singing voice is fantastic. And correct me if I'm wrong. He paused to look at the mushroom girl. But aren't most idols rather introverted and shy in their private lives?
The brunette nodded her head enthusiastically.
Hi! You all have seen how I act most of the time when we're around others. I'd say I'm about average for girls aspiring to be idols. But you're all forgetting something.
Izuku interjects, hoping to keep them from making the same error that everyone fell into at Aldera.
I present mainly as male.
The other three teens looked at each other for a moment, their faces turning serious. Before the heiress got up and came over to the brunette.
Midori-kun, no one here is saying you have to be a girl. Please don't think that. We're not even saying that you have to be an idol. But please, don't forget that you don't have to be a girl to be an idol. Yes, most people hear the word idol and go first to female singers, but there are male bands too, and actors in other professions, including heroes and art, are idols. Look at All Might. But what we want and what we hope for you is that you'll embrace your quirk and what you are. I know from our discussions that you're still questioning where you are on the gender spectrum. That really is up to you, and we're not trying to pressure you into a decision on that issue. We're just, well, let's put it this way. You get excited when you're exposed to a new quirk, right?
Izuku nodded in response, as he knew full well how he got when discussing not his own quirks not his own.
Well, we're your friends. So can you understand how we'd be excited learning about your quirk and the possibilities it shows?
The idol wannabe teen nodded enthusiastically as Komori added,
Yeah, I'm just happy I get someone I can talk idol stuff with, true? Most people think my passion for idols is excessive or weird. It's not.
Izuku instantly said in defense of his friend.
I mean, it's good to have something you're passionate about.
Just so. The blue-haired boy finally speaks up. And you don't think I'm weird for looking up to my brother so much. In fact, you've given me a couple ideas about my quirk. So when you told us about your quirk, I saw the opportunity to return the favor. I apologize if you thought I was pressuring you in any way. The adults in the room were all smiles as the teens kept talking, except Aizawa. His lips did not curl up in the slightest. No, he was tired, and he did not feel proud of his boy getting such good friends. First the frog girl, and now these kids. No, he was not happy for him in the least. Listen to them, problem child. And why did Nobuyori give him that look? Sorry, I couldn't contain my laugh there. Excuse me. It wasn't much longer before the kids were told to leave campus and go somewhere else. They were encouraged to at least check in with their parents, who were probably worried. Yarurozu-san offered them all a ride, under the pretense of getting them home faster, when she obviously wanted to know where they all lived. All but Tenyu agreed, with him adding he had to catch the train to Hosu. A man with long, straight, black hair looked up from his laptop toward another man sitting at the end of a table. Around this table were another 4 people beside the leader and himself. It's done, he said to the people collected around the room. The heroes and police won't be able to trace anything back to us. The fallout will be limited to those at the school, and even then, only through Takawa. Good, the leader said as he steepled his hands in front of him while resting his hands on the table. We are not ready to be known yet,
Though it was fortuitous that we got the advanced warning in time, he said, looking toward a brightly costumed person at the other end of the table. I couldn't do anything to stop it, the costumed man said with a sigh and a shake of his head. Nezu is spearheading this operation, and it is far too dangerous to try to subvert any investigation he is leading. Still, I'm loath to lose such a rich breeding ground for our ideals, another man in a business suit added on. Think of all the impressionable kids who are having their entire lives turned upside down because of one small boy.
At least he wasn't quirkless,
the only woman at the table hummed.
We could use that.
Oh, what do you have in mind?
Give me a day or two, and you will see what I mean. This could be just the thing we need to publicly spearhead our cause. And if some legislation was to be put forward at the same time as my story,
the woman led on, looking over at the man in the suit.
Indeed.
I do believe I am beginning to understand where you are coming from. Yes, this could work very well for us, the addressed man responded. See what you can find about this. Midoriya Izuku in the meantime. I can get some people ready for a push. Very well, the leader said before turning his attention to the man with the long black hair. Coordinate between the two of them and help them in whatever way they need. We'll turn the loss of this school into something good for us yet.
One sec, y'all.
A man sits in a chair and studies the news closely. Several tubes and wires are connected to the man's body, which are in turn connected to several machines, each performing a specific task. Beside him stands a rather obese man in a white lab coat and thick round glasses that almost seems mounted on a bushy white beard. Together, they watch and listen to a news broadcast on one screen, while another screen provides a behind-the-scenes stream of information. I have to admit, Garaki, when you first alerted me to this boy, I wondered what you found so interesting in him, the seated man said as he felt something stream across his fingertips.
I admit my obfuscation of the effects of half of his quirk worked a little too well,
the man said with a twitch of his lips.
But even then, I had detected that the boy's quirk was highly adaptable and mutable. Thus, the reason I flagged him for future study. But even I had no idea it would change to this.
Agreed. There was no indication his quirk would mutate to such a degree. Did you have any success in finding out more about his current abilities? The man asked.
Only that the second power seems to have grown stronger, and that my supposition of changing the physical sex of the child proved accurate. Beyond that, as far as our government and hospital contacts are concerned, there have been no changes. And the commune school system is very hard to get in any effective assets place. He isn't even going back to the court counselor that the school system had set him up with. That's just as well. I do not feel like sharing any potentially new toys with anyone, especially them.
The faceless man replied. It's too bad you had to move after your grandson disappeared. I'm sure you could have found a way to get within that boy's circle of confidence otherwise.
Ah, yes, the disappearance of my grandson hit his family rather hard, I'm afraid.
Garaki said as he looked over to a large tub, where a gray head floated in the water.
Such a shame.
Well, in the meantime, we have young Tomura to concentrate on. He'll need to be ready for when the time comes. All for One mentioned with a chuckle. But keep an eye open just in case an opportunity arises.
Of course.
The bad doctor replied as he made some notes on the tablet he was holding. The man closed the door, but that did not fully cut out the screams from the child within. He shuddered as he thought what that punk was doing to that girl. This was just not right. She was only 5 years old. Children that age should not be subjected to the horrors of the criminal underworld, much less to the horrors of genetic experimentation. A particularly loud scream caused him to flinch, and he made up his mind. Something had to be done. It didn't take him long to get above ground and find the boss. The man had an open door policy for people his rank or higher, so getting in wasn't a problem either. What was a problem was keeping the boss calm as he explained the situation. As the lieutenant thought, the boss had no idea what Chisaki was doing.
That's it. He's out.
The boss yelled. Just as he was about to order another lieutenant to fetch the man, the reporting lieutenant held up his hands in front of him. Wait, boss. He froze as the head of the Yakuza fixed him with a piercing glare. Instantly, he fell to his knees and bowed deeply in supplication. The boss was not a man to be trifled with, if one was fond of living.
You presume to order me to wait while my granddaughter is being tortured?
The boss's voice echoed throughout the office, low and menacing. I dare not order you, boss, the reporting lieutenant exclaimed while prostrating himself on the floor. But I need to advise caution.
Explain,
came the rumbling response. Even in the current situation, I cannot question Shisaki's devotion to the Yakuza. All of his infractions have originated from a sense of trying to return our clan to its former glory. But that is also what makes him dangerous, even beyond his already dangerous quirk. The prostrated man responded.
How does torturing my granddaughter equate to loyalty to the Yakuza?
I know what his end goal is. It is based off of your granddaughter's quirk. It rewinds time for targeted people. While you and I would think it useless as a power for our clan, he proposes to use her to make some kind of drug to get rid of quirks altogether. No more quirks means no more heroes or villains. That would allow the Yakuza to fill the power vacuum left by the disappearance of quirks.
If that is true,
the boss then replies as he sees what is being implied.
then my opposition to his plan would be against the good of the clan.
The large man sits back in his seat and steeples his head in front of him.
The Yakuza are a dying breed, but if we take away honor and humanity, we can resurrect it with that drug. That is what Chisaki is doing.
Yes, boss, the reporting lieutenant confirmed. Boss, Harry's quirk is too tempting for any Yakuza, or criminal or villain for that matter. Not to mention she's only 5 years old. Our own laws and code of honor demands we do something about this. I'd like your permission to act. But if I do, you may never see her again. The boss of the Yakuza frowned and rested his chin on his steepled fingers for a long moment, as he pondered what his trusted lieutenant had just said. Finally, he sighed and lowered his hands to his desk. As long as she has a happy life, do what you must. Make sure your will is filled out first. The man nodded once, then bowed before leaving the office to make his plans and his will. Alright, y'all. That one got a little heavier towards the end.
was not expecting a mention of Eri this early on. Wow. Okay, this is really picking up. Also, the invasion of the middle school. Holy cow. All right. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed the chapter as much as I did. Please go show DrgnMstr and Lofi Geek some love. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or just want to talk about the chapter, feel free to drop a comment down below. I do my best to answer every comment. And I will see you guys in my next video, hopefully. Ciao for now.